Charles Starkweather was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. His killing spree, which took place in the late 1950s, spanned several states and left 11 people dead, including a young girl and her infant child. The shocking and brutal nature of his crimes captured the attention of the nation and inspired numerous songs, movies, and books. Starkweather, who was just 19 years old at the time of the killings, had a troubled childhood marked by poverty, abuse, and neglect. Despite his tumultuous upbringing, he had a charismatic personality that allowed him to charm and manipulate those around him. He eventually formed a relationship with a young girl named Carol Fugate, and the two went on a killing spree that lasted several months. In this video, we'll delve into the life and crimes of Charles Starkweather, exploring the events that led to his descent into darkness and the trail of terror he left behind. From his troubled childhood to his eventual capture and execution, we'll examine the factors that contributed to his reign of terror and the legacy he left behind. So, join us as we delve into the disturbing world of Charles Starkweather, one of America's most notorious serial killers. But before we get started, please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified about our amazing upcoming informative videos. Now sit back, relax, and let's go. Early life. Charles Starkweather was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on November 24, 1938. He was the youngest of 7 children and grew up in poverty in a rough neighborhood. His parents were physically and emotionally abusive, and he often ran away from home as a child. Despite his troubled upbringing, he was considered intelligent and was an above-average student. In his teenage years, Starkweather became involved with petty crime and was arrested several times for theft and burglary. He also became involved with drugs and alcohol and was known to be violent and unpredictable. Despite these warning signs, he managed to maintain relationships with several girlfriends and was able to charm those around him. In the mid-1950s, Starkweather met a young girl named Carol Fugate, who was just 14 years old at the time. The two formed a relationship and began living together, but their relationship was marked by violence and abuse. The volatile nature of their relationship would eventually lead to a killing spree that left 11 people dead and stunned the nation. Murders and victims. In 1957, aged 19, Starkweather committed his first murder. On November 30th, he went to a gas station and tried to buy a stuffed dog toy for Fugate. When he found that he wasn't carrying enough money, the manager, Robert Calvert, refused to let him buy it on credit and threw him out. At 3 a.m. the next day, he returned with a shotgun. First, he entered the store twice and bought first a package of cigarettes and then a package of chewing gum. The third time, he came in dressed with a bandana and a hat to cover his face and held him at gunpoint with the shotgun. After forcing him to open the store safe and robbing it, he forced Calvert outside to his own car, made him drive to a nearby remote area and shot and killed him. Later that day, he told Carol about the robbery, though he left out the part when he killed Calvert. Starkweather later lost his job as a garbage collector and was evicted from where he lived because he couldn't pay his rent. On January 21, 1958, he went to Fugate's family's home with a rifle and ammunition. The details of what happened that day are sketchy, but the outcome of his visit was that Fugate's stepfather, Marion Bartlett, and mother, Velda Bartlett, were both shot to death with the rifle he brought, and their baby daughter, Betty Jean, was fatally stabbed and strangled. After putting up a sign on the house's door saying the whole household was sick with the flu, they spent a few days living in the house with the bodies of Fugate's family still in there. Police arrived on the 27th after Fugate's grandmother became suspicious and called them, by which time she and Starkweather had already gone to a farm in Bennett, Nebraska and killed the owner. They hitched a ride from 2 teenagers, Robert Jensen and Carol King, and killed them after forcing them to drive them to a nearby abandoned storm shelter. The next day, by which time they had already left the area, the duo's old car, which had gotten stuck in the mud, was found along with the bodies of Meyer and the teenagers. Starkweather and Fugate then fled to a wealthier part of Lincoln with Jensen's car and attacked the home of a wealthy industrialist named C. Lauer Ward. Only his wife, Clara Ward, and their maid, Lillian Fenkel, were home at the time. After killing Ward and one of the household's 2 dogs, they forced Fenkel to make them breakfast. When Mr. Ward himself came home that afternoon, he was shot to death. Frankel was then tied to a bed and killed as well. When the bodies were found, a full-scale manhunt began seriously and the police started a house-by-house search of the area and even called in the National Guard. When Starkweather and Fugate realized that the Packard they were driving would attract attention, they approached a Buick owned by Merle Collison, a traveling salesman. Near the highway close to Douglas, Wyoming, shot him to death, stole the vehicle and drove away. Capture and trial. Charles Starkweather's killing spree came to an end on January 29, 1958, when he was captured by police in Douglas, Wyoming. He was spotted driving a stolen car and was pursued by police, who eventually forced him to pull over. He was taken into custody without incident and was later extradited to Nebraska to face trial for the 11 murders he had committed. Starkweather's trial began on April 21, 1958, in Lincoln, Nebraska. He was charged with first-degree murder and faced the death penalty if convicted. The trial lasted just 2 weeks, and the evidence against Starkweather was overwhelming. He was found guilty on all 11 counts of murder and was sentenced to death. Starkweather's girlfriend, Carol Fugate, was also charged with murder and faced the death penalty. However, she claimed that she had been held captive by Starkweather and was not involved in the killings. She was eventually found guilty of being an accessory to the murders and was sentenced to life in prison. She was released on parole in 1976 and has since disappeared from public view. Charles Starkweather's capture and trial marked the end of a killing spree that shocked the nation and left 11 people dead. He was eventually executed by electric chair on June 25, 1959, at the Nebraska State Penitentiary in Lincoln, Nebraska. His legacy as one of America's most notorious serial killers lives on, and his story continues to captivate and horrify those who study true crime. In conclusion, the crimes of Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate shocked the nation and left a lasting impact on American society. Despite being nearly 60 years in the past, their story continues to captivate and fascinate those who study true crime. The capture and trial of Charles Starkweather marked the end of a brutal killing spree that left 11 people dead and serves as a reminder of the horrors that can lurk within even the most seemingly. While his legacy will always be remembered as one of America's most notorious serial killers, it's important to remember the victims of his crimes and to never forget the lives that were taken too soon. Thank you for watching this video, and we hope you found it informative and educational.